Welcome, dear listener. Tonight, we invite you to settle in, dim the lights, and let your mind drift into the mysterious world of Hercule Poirot, where time, deceit, and murder entwine. If you love classic mysteries and soothing storytelling, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, tap the bell icon, and join our community of mystery lovers who adore every ticking second of Poirot's adventures. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. The Ticking Summons. In the gloaming of that tempestuous autumn eve in the year 1935, the cobbled lane leading to Ashford Hall resounded with the resolute rumble of Hercule Poirot's chauffeured saloon car, a gleaming Austin that sliced through the swirling mists of the Yorkshire moors like a scalpel through the veils of obfuscation. The diminutive Belgian detective, attired with his customary impeccability in polished brogues that gleamed even in the dim light, a bespoke overcoat of finest wool tailored to hug his compact frame, and a fedora tilted with mathematical precision, alighted from the vehicle with the unhurried grace of one who comprehended that time, though inexorable, bent to the will of superior intellect. His moustache, curled and waxed to an exquisite symmetry that bespoke both aesthetic vanity and vigilant acuity, quivered faintly in the gale-force winds, as if the very elements whispered portents of the temporal enigmas awaiting him within the hall's brooding confines. Ashford Hall loomed before him, a Gothic edifice of weathered stone and towering spires, its central clock tower piercing the leaden sky like a sentinel of chronology, the face of its great dial glowing faintly against the encroaching dusk. The moors stretched endlessly around, windswept and desolate, their heather-clad undulations shrouded in fog that lent an air of profound isolation, as if the estate existed in a pocket of time severed from the bustling world beyond. Poirot had been beckoned hither by an urgent wire from his steadfast associate, Chief Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, a man of bluff pragmatism and unyielding tenacity, whose methods, though efficacious in their bluntness, often necessitated the finesse of Poirot's celebrated grey cells to untangle the more labyrinthine conundrums. The missive had been characteristically terse, yet pregnant with implication. Poirot, my lad, queer doings at Ashford Hall on the moors. Lord Ashford done in, time to the tick. Kinfolk a tangle of motives and alibis. Your grey cells imperative. Haste. Japp, with his penchant for straightforward collars and his occasional exasperation at Poirot's methodical deliberations, had evidently encountered a puzzle where the threads of chronology intertwined with malice in a manner defying his customary investigative bludgeon. Poirot, ever the aficionado of the arcane and the anomalous, had responded with alacrity. For what greater allure existed than a murder where time itself played the role of accomplice? As he ascended the broad stone steps, flanked by grotesque gargoyles, whose leering visages seemed to mock the futility of mortal endeavours in the face of eternity, the massive oaken portal of the hall creaked ajar with a groan that echoed through the vestibule like the sigh of a long-forgotten epoch. There emerged Mr. Elias Thorne, the valet, a wiry gentleman in his mid-50s, possessed of sallow skin stretched taut over angular bones, and eyes like tarnished brass, reflecting a lustre dimmed by years of subservient drudgery. His livery was pressed to rigid perfection, yet there clung to him an aura of suppressed ambition, as if the yoke of service had forged within his psyche a simmering cauldron of unfulfilled aspirations and latent resentments. Thorne had tended to Lord Timothy Ashford for nigh on 2 decades, his duties encompassing the minutiae of the horologist's daily existence, from the polishing of intricate timepieces to the orchestration of his master's sartorial elegance. Yet beneath this veneer of devotion lurked a profound grievance. Ashford had repeatedly promised Thorn a promotion to estate steward, only to withhold it in favour of familial indulgences, wounding the valet's pride and kindling a motive rooted in the bitter soil of thwarted advancement and the allure of a substantial bequest outlined in the Lord's will. Monsieur Poirot, Thorn articulated with a glacial courtesy that bordered upon the funereal, his voice a low timbre resonant with the hall's ancient reverberations. The household assembles in the library, awaiting your elucidation. A calamity most profound, sir, most profound indeed. Poirot inclined his head in gracious acknowledgment, his verdant gaze, sharp as emeralds honed by intellect, appraising the valet with the discernment of a connoisseur evaluating a potentially flawed artifact. "Assuredly, mon ami," he replied in his accented English, each syllable enunciated with the elegance of a Bach prelude. "Death disrupts the harmonious order of existence, yet that order shall be restored through the exercise of method and the little grey cells. Pray, conduct me forthwith." They traversed the grand vestibule, where suits of armour stood sentinel along walls adorned with tapestries depicting chronometric allegories. Father Time wielding his scythe amid celestial spheres, and the air was redolent with the mingled scents of beeswax from polished floors, the faint metallic tang of brass mechanisms, and the musty undertone of aged leather from innumerable horological tomes. Thorn moved with the silent efficiency of one habituated to invisibility in the presence of betters. Yet Poirot discerned a subtle hesitation in the man's gait, a psychological harbinger, perhaps, of nerves frayed by intimate proximity to tragedy or complicity therein. The library unfolded before them as a veritable repository of temporal treasures. Towering shelves groaned beneath the weight of arcane volumes on horology, from treatises on escapements to dissertations on sidereal time. Brass orreries whirred softly upon pedestals, their planetary models orbiting in meticulous mimicry of the cosmos. And dominating the space stood a colossal grandfather clock, its mahogany case intricately carved with motifs of hourglasses and sundials, its pendulum swinging with the inexorable cadence of destiny itself. Yet tonight, an oppressive hush prevailed, punctuated only by the solemn ticks of the clock, each one a reminder of the victim's obsession with the relentless march of seconds, minutes, and hours. The room's atmosphere was thick with melancholy, as if the very mechanisms mourned their creator's untimely cessation. Convened within this sanctum of scholarship were the principal actors in this chronometric tragedy, each a tableau vivant of veiled disquiet and concealed machinations. Lady Beatrice Ashford, the victim's spouse, reclined upon a velvet chaise longue, a statuesque woman of 50 summers, with silver-streaked auburn tresses cascading in elegant waves and eyes of steely resolve that pierced like the hands of a precision timepiece. Her psychology was a study in controlled poise masking a jealous possessiveness. Timothy's all-consuming devotion to his clocks had relegated her to the periphery of his affections, fostering a bitterness that simmered like a slow-winding spring. Clad in a gown of midnight silk that accentuated her regal bearing, her motive whispered of inheritance vast enough to fund a life unencumbered by neglect, coupled with liberation from a marriage where she played second fiddle to mechanical marvels. Beside her stood Victor Langdon, a rival horologist in his 40s, lean and hawkish with wire-rimmed spectacles perched upon a beak-like nose and a mane of unruly dark hair that bespoke a mind more attuned to invention than vanity. Attired in tweed suiting redolent of academic austerity, his eyes darted with the cunning of a fox in scholarly garb. Langdon's envy was a palpable miasma. Ashford had surreptitiously appropriated his innovative designs for escapements, claiming patents that rightfully belonged to him, thus eclipsing his career and breeding a vindictive obsession. Psychological profile: an intellectual narcissist, prone to elaborate schemes where retribution masqueraded as justice. Then there was young Edmund Ashford, the nephew, a dashing scion of 28, with tousled chestnut locks framing a countenance of roguish charm and eyes twinkling with a predatory gleam that belied his affable demeanour. Orphaned young and raised in the hall's shadow, he had squandered his allowances on dissipated pursuits in London's gaming dens, leading to disinheritance by his uncle. His motive: fiscal desperation, debts mounting like unchecked interest, veiled beneath a facade of familial loyalty. Miss Lydia Harrow, the secretary, hovered by the oaken desk, a prim figure of 35, with mousy hair confined in a severe bun and spectacles framing shrewd, calculating eyes that missed naught. Her attire was modest wool, yet her posture exuded an efficiency tempered by inner turmoil. Outwardly devoted, her psyche harboured vengeful embers. Ashford had spurned her romantic overtures with cruel indifference, humiliating her in private correspondences. Motive: the sting of rejected affection transmuted into a desire for reprisal. Finally, lurking amid the shadows cast by the orreries, stood Mr. Silas Crowe, the curator, a stooped elder of 60, with wispy white hair like cobwebs and gnarled hands that trembled slightly from years of delicate restorations. His eyes, faded blue, held the fire of unresolved indignation. Ashford had publicly accused him of forging a rare Elizabethan timepiece, tarnishing his venerable reputation in horological circles. Motive: professional retribution, to reclaim honour sullied by false aspersions. Poirot surveyed this assemblage with the detachment of a horologist examining a complex movement, his mind already calibrating the gears of motive and opportunity. "Ladies and gentlemen," he proclaimed, his voice a silken thread cutting through the tension like a pendulum's arc. "I am Hercule Poirot, the detective whose renown in unraveling the inscrutable precedes him. Chief Inspector Japp has enlisted my services to pierce this veil of temporal tragedy. Pray, relate for me the occurrences of last night, that the grey cells may commence their labour." Lady Beatrice spoke first, her voice tremulous yet laced with steel. Timothy retired to the Grand Hall at 11, as was his invariable ritual, to wind the grandfather clock and ensure its precision. At the stroke of midnight, it chimed, and we heard a thud. He lay collapsed beneath it, froth at his lips, no visible wounds. The physician pronounces it arsenic poisoning. Victor Langdon interjected sharply, his hawkish features twisting. A timed poison, no doubt, administered via one of his own mechanisms. His inventions were riddled with such contrivances. Edmund chuckled darkly, a roguish glint in his eye. Uncle was ever obsessed with time. Perhaps it caught up with him in the end. Lydia dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, her shrewd gaze averted. He was a brilliant man, yet unkind in his brilliance. Crowe muttered from the shadows, his gnarled hands clenching. Curses be upon such men who wield time as a weapon against others. Thorne, having entered with a tray of brandy decanters, poured with steady hands, though Poirot noted a fleeting hesitation, a psychological clue to inner discord, perhaps the echo of a conscience perturbed. As the interviews proceeded in measured cadence, Poirot requested an inspection of the fatal scene. The grand hall was a cavernous expanse, dominated by the towering grandfather clock, its face inscrutable as a sphinx. Upon the marble floor lay a brass key fragment, glinting ominously, a potential clue, or a deliberate red herring. In the accumulated dust near the base, footprints appeared smudged by hurried passage, another layer of misdirection to confound the unwary. Poirot lingered, his fingers tracing the clock's carvings. Time, he murmured to himself. It marches inexorably onward, yet here it has been subverted to conceal a murder most precise. The evening deepened, shadows lengthening like the hands of a dial approaching midnight, as Poirot retired to ponder the mosaic of motives and temporal deceptions. The summons had been answered, but the ticking of revelation had only just begun its overture. Chapter 2. Echoes of the pendulum dawn broke pallid and forlorn over Ashford Hall, the Yorkshire moors shrouded in a spectral mist that clung to the clock tower's spire like the ghosts of uncounted hours. The gales of the previous night had subsided to a desultory whisper, rustling the heather and carrying the faint, mournful cry of curlews across the desolate expanse, as if the very landscape lamented the disruption of temporal harmony within the hall's ancient walls. Hercule Poirot, ever the adherent to ritual amid chaos, had arisen with the first wan light filtering through the mullioned windows of his guest chamber, partaking of a modest breakfast in the morning room. Flaky croissants, accompanied by a steaming café noir, the aroma of which served as a tonic to his contemplative faculties. As he savoured each morsel with deliberate precision, his little grey cells whirred like the escapements of a finely crafted timepiece, dissecting the alibis and revelations proffered during the nocturnal interrogations. The poison, arsenic, an insidious agent as relentless as the ticking of seconds, had claimed Lord Timothy Ashford in a manner synchronized with the midnight chime, administered through a mechanism concealed within the grandfather clock itself. But by whose cunning hand? The suspects, akin to the disparate gears in a malfunctioning movement, each contributed to the discord, their motives interlocking in a puzzle of chronological malice. Poirot's meditations were momentarily interrupted by the arrival of Chief Inspector Japp, who bustled into the room with the vigour of a man unaccustomed to the languid rhythms of moorland estates. His overcoat bore traces of the morning's dew, and his bowler hat sat at a jaunty angle upon his brow, a testament to his indefatigable spirit. "Morning, Poirot," he grunted, accepting a proffered cup of tea with a nod of gratitude. "Slept like a babe in a cradle. Pardon the temporal pun. What have those famous cells of yours unearthed overnight?" The detective dabbed his moustache with a linen napkin, his verdant eyes gleaming with that peculiar intensity which heralded the pursuit of verity. "Ah, mon cher Japp, the night bestows counsel, as the sages Ava. The alibis, they resemble a clockwork assemblage with misaligned cogs. We must probe them anew, with the delicacy of a watchmaker adjusting a hairspring." Their colloquy turned to the exigencies of the investigation. Japp had dispatched subordinates to canvass the nearby hamlets for any clandestine acquisitions of arsenic. Such a toxin, after all, left traces in the ledgers of apothecaries and chemists. Meanwhile, Poirot advocated a systematic re-examination of the suspect's testimonies, commencing with Lady Beatrice Ashford. The lady, summoned to the library where the colossal grandfather clock continued its solemn vigil, entered with the regal poise of one accustomed to command, her silver-streaked auburn tresses impeccably coiffed, and her midnight silk gown whispering against the parquet floor. yet her steely eyes betrayed a flicker of unease, a psychological fracture in her veneer of composure. She asserted her solitude in the boudoir until the midnight chime, a timeline jarred by Thorne's discreet observation of a figure resembling her silhouette, gliding near the grand hall at 11:30. Mere fancy on the valet's part, she demurred, with a wave of her elegant hand, though her possessive ire simmered beneath the surface, born of years where Timothy's horological pursuits had eclipsed their conjugal bond, leaving her a spectator in her own matrimony. Undeterred by her protestations, Poirot ventured into the clock gallery, a labyrinthine chamber replete with whirring mechanisms and gleaming dials that chronicled the passage of epochs. Here he encountered Victor Langdon, the rival horologist, who was ostensibly cataloguing artifacts amid shelves of antique chronometers, his hawkish features illuminated by the soft glow of a desk lamp. Langdon's lean frame tensed at Poirot's approach, his wire-rimmed spectacles slipping slightly upon his beak-like nose as he straightened. "Monsieur Poirot," he intoned with academic frostiness, "I was ensconced here in archival toil until the chime summoned us all. Ashford's pilfered designs, my escapements, patented under his name, drove me to vigilance, not violence." Yet Poirot's acute observation unearthed a damning clue. A discarded leather glove bearing Langdon's monogrammed initial, nestled inconspicuously near the grandfather clock's base in the hall. "Envy, monsieur, it forges inventions of a darker sort," Poirot probed silkily. Langdon's narcissism cracked momentarily, his eyes darting like errant seconds' hands, a behavioral pattern indicative of deception, or perhaps a red herring sown by another. Returning to the grounds, where the mist parted sporadically to reveal the undulating moors, Poirot sought young Edmund Ashford in the billiard room, where the nephew lounged with feigned nonchalance, cue in hand amid the click of ivory spheres. His tousled chestnut locks and roguish grin masked a predatory cunning, honed by the gaming tables of Mayfair. "I was here caroming balls till the clock struck," Edmund professed with a chuckle that rang hollow. But a concealed ledger, discovered tucked within a sideboard drawer during Poirot's unobtrusive perusal, revealed debts to unsavoury moneylenders, sums spiralling like unchecked compound, interest, motive amplified by his recent disinheritance. The nephew's grin faltered under scrutiny, a psychological telltale of desperation veiled by charm, his fingers drumming restlessly upon the baize, a clue to inner agitation. Miss Lydia Harrow was next, located in the study where she pored over correspondence with the efficiency of a well-oiled automaton, her mousy hair in its severe bun, and her shrewd eyes magnified behind spectacles. She perched upon a stool with prim decorum, yet her hands betrayed a faint quiver as Poirot inquired into her whereabouts. "I remained here, transcribing notes until the alarm," she averred, her voice a whisper of controlled emotion. Under gentle probing, she confessed partial truths. "Lord Ashford rejected my affections with cruel indifference. Letters returned unopened. Humiliation that scars the soul." Her calculating gaze flickered evasively. Footprints in the hall's dust matched the sensible tread of her shoes, a potential misdirection or evidence of nocturnal wanderings. The curator, Mr. Silas Crowe, was discovered in the workshop, a dimly lit annex redolent of oil and brass polish, where he hunched over a dismantled pocket watch with gnarled hands that spoke of decades devoted to restoration. His wispy white hair framed a face etched with indignation, his faded blue eyes igniting at Poirot's queries. "I was here mending relics till the chime," he growled, his voice gravelly as grinding gears. "Ashford's accusation of forgery. It besmirched my name in every horological society from London to Geneva." Poirot noted traces of a powdery residue upon Crow's fingers. Arsenic, perhaps, from legitimate preservatives used in antiquity conservation. The curator's bitter profile suggested a savant capable of retribution, yet his alibi held firm, corroborated by the workshop's isolated clamour. A red herring, perchance, to divert from subtler culprits. Finally, Poirot confronted Thorne once more, in the servants' quarters amid the gleam of polished silver and the tick of a modest wall clock. The valet polished a fob watch with mechanical precision, his sallow features impassive, yet his tarnished brass eyes evaded direct gaze. "You harbour resentment, mon ami," Poirot observed astutely. "The promised promotion, denied repeatedly. It festers like rust upon fine machinery." Thorne stiffened, his voice a murmur of constrained fury. "A slight, sir, long endured. His lordship's whims favoured kin over merit." The valet's hesitation deepened, a psychological hint of deeper malaise, his hands pausing mid-polish, a harbinger of concealed malice. As the afternoon waned, Poirot roamed the mist-veiled grounds, unearthing a shard of glass vial concealed within the hedgerows, discarded in haste, its residue hinting at arsenic. Timeline inconsistencies proliferated. Langdon's archival logs showed silence until 11. Lady Beatrice's perfume lingered anomalously in the hall. Edmund's billiard cues bore fresh chalk, suggesting recent fabrication. In the solitude of the library, Poirot pondered amid the whirring orreries, hidden motives intertwined like the springs of a perpetual motion machine. Avarice for Edmund, vengeance for Lydia and Crow, envy for Langdon, possessiveness for Beatrice, and thwarted ambition for Thorne. The pendulum swung onward, echoing secrets in its unyielding arc, as the shadows of suspicion lengthened toward revelations yet concealed. Chapter 3. Fractured Hours. Noon ushered in a resurgence of gales upon Ashford Hall, the winds howling across the Yorkshire moors with a ferocity that rattled the leaded panes and sequestered the inhabitants within the estate's labyrinthine corridors, transforming the Gothic pile into a hermetic vessel adrift in a sea of temporal turmoil. The relentless blasts whipped the heather into frenzied undulations, while intermittent squalls pelted the stone facade like the erratic beats of a malfunctioning metronome, as if the elements themselves conspired to fracture the illusions of chronological certainty that had long defined the hall's ethos. Hercule Poirot, impervious to the meteorological maelstrom, orchestrated a series of individual interrogations in the clock gallery, a cavernous chamber replete with whirring mechanisms, gleaming dials, and antique timepieces that ticked in dissonant chorus, mocking the human presumption of mastering time's inexorable flow. The air within was thick with the metallic tang of brass and the subtle hum of escapements, a symphony of precision that now served as an ironic backdrop to the unraveling deceptions. Poirot seated himself upon a velvet upholstered bench amid the exhibits, his polished brogues planted firmly upon the Persian rug, and summoned each suspect in turn, his verdant gaze piercing the veils of artifice with the acuity of a master horologist discerning a flaw in a jewelled movement. First to confront the detective's scrutiny was Lady Beatrice Ashford, who swept into the gallery with the stately grace of a dowager duchess, her silver-streaked auburn tresses coiled in an elaborate chignon, and her eyes of steely resolve glinting like the facets of a chronometer's crystal. The winds howled beyond the arched windows, casting fleeting shadows across her regal features as she settled opposite Poirot, her midnight silk gown pooling like inky shadows. "This interminable storm mirrors the tempest in my soul," she murmured, her voice a tremulous cadence laced with underlying steel. Poirot, ever the paragon of empathetic inquiry, inclined his head sympathetically. "Madame, the gales without pale beside the gales within. Let us revisit your narrative. You claim seclusion in your boudoir until the midnight chime, yet the valet Thorn espies a silhouette akin to yours near the Grand Hall at 11:30. A mere apparition, perhaps, or did some exigency draw you thither?" Lady Beatrice's composure fractured momentarily, her possessive jealousy erupting like a spring, uncoiled after years of tension. His clocks were his mistresses, cold, unyielding contrivances that commandeered his affections while I languished in solitude, she exclaimed, her hands clenching in her lap, a behavioral pattern betraying the depth of her bitterness, born from a marriage where horological pursuits had supplanted conjugal warmth. Under Poirot's relentless probing, a torn letter emerged from a reticule, evidence she had intended to conceal, an ultimatum penned in her own elegant script, threatening divorce and the exposure of Timothy's neglectful indiscretions. The monogrammed glove discovered near the clock, bearing Victor Langdon's initial, she dismissed as a plant, yet her steely gaze flickered with calculation, suggesting a red herring sown to divert suspicion. Poirot noted the psychological undercurrent, a woman of controlled poise, her motive intertwined with liberation from emotional penury, and the allure of an unencumbered inheritance, vast as the moors themselves. No sooner had the lady departed, her footsteps echoing like receding chimes through the corridors, than Victor Langdon strode into the gallery, his lean, hawkish frame taut with academic indignation, his wire-rimmed spectacles perched precariously upon his beak-like nose as he navigated the array of timepieces. The gales rattled the casements, distorting the light that fell upon his unruly dark hair, casting him in a chiaroscuro of suspicion. He seated himself with brusque efficiency, his tweed suiting exuding the austerity of one more at home amid blueprints than social niceties. "Monsieur Poirot," he intoned sharply, his voice a clipped precision akin to a ticking second hand. "Must we dissect this anew? I toiled in archival pursuits until the fatal stroke. Ashford's theft of my escapement designs warranted vigilance, not venom." Poirot's moustache twitched, a barometer of his cerebral machinations. "Monsieur, your envy. It forges a mechanism of retribution. The glove bearing your monogram, nestled by the clock. Mere coincidence, or a token of your presence." Langdon's narcissism cracked under the strain, his eyes darting like errant pendulums as he confessed to bitter rivalries. Patents pilfered under false pretenses, my genius eclipsed by his charlatanry. Traces of arsenic residue in the workshop, ostensibly from preservative compounds, now loomed as physical evidence of his handling of the toxin, his own or framed by a cunning adversary. Poirot discerned the psychological profile, an intellectual driven by vindictive obsession, prone to elaborate schemes where justice masqueraded as malice. Yet the glove's placement hinted at misdirection, a planted clue to ensnare the unwary. Young Edmund Ashford followed, sauntering into the gallery with his characteristic roguish charm, his tousled chestnut locks dishevelled by the draught seeping through the windows, his eyes twinkling with a predatory gleam that belied his affable facade. He lounged upon the bench with feigned insouciance, yet his fingers drummed restlessly, a behavioural clue to inner desperation. "Monsieur, this ordeal unravels one like a sprung mainspring," he quipped, his voice a light tenor masking fiscal woes. Poirot leaned forward, his inquiry a gentle yet incisive probe. Monsieur Ashford, your alibi of billiard pursuits till midnight. It fractures under scrutiny. A witness espies you slipping a vial, perhaps of arsenic, into your pocket at 10:45. Debts devour you, non? The ledger unveils sums astronomical. Disinheritance a mortal blow. Edmund's composure faltered, artful tears welling in his eyes as he wept with theatrical flair. Uncle's parsimony left me adrift in seas of obligation. Gaming dens claim their toll. The timeline flaw deepened his culpability. Seen lingering near the hall, his motive of inheritance veiled by familial bonhomie. Yet the vial's description matched one from the workshop, a potential collusion or masterful forgery to implicate another. Poirot pondered the nephew's profile, a survivor schooled in charm's artifice, his desperation a gear turning toward lethal expediency. Miss Lydia Harrow entered next, her prim figure navigating the gallery's aisles with the efficiency of a well-regulated automaton. Her mousy hair in its severe bun, and her shrewd eyes magnified behind spectacles that reflected the whirring clocks. She perched upon the bench with modest decorum, yet her hands twisted a handkerchief, a telltale sign of vengeful embers smouldering within. "This storm confines us like prisoners in time's jail," she whispered, her voice a quiver of suppressed emotion. Poirot's gaze softened, probing gently. "Mademoiselle, your devotion to transcription till the chime. It aligns imperfectly. Footprints in the hall's dust match your tread, overlaid perhaps by another's, collusion or solitary venture." Lydia's vengeful heart bared itself under scrutiny, humiliation unending, his rejection of my affections, letters scorned like faulty cogs. Her calculating psyche revealed a woman capable of reprisal, the footprints a damning clue or deliberate misdirection to ensnare a rival. Motive, the sting of spurned romance, transmuted into a desire for poetic justice amid the ticks of retribution. The curator, Mr. Silas Crowe, shuffled in last among the primary suspects, his stooped form weaving through the exhibits with gnarled hands that trembled from years of delicate labours, his wispy white hair like ethereal vapours in the draughty air. "What fresh inquisition, detective?" he growled, seating himself with the resignation of one long accused. Poirot inquired. "Monsieur, your workshop vigil till midnight. It holds, yet your hands bear stains akin to arsenic. The forgery accusation. It ignites retribution's flame." Crowe's indignation boiled forth. "A baseless lie that tarnished my legacy. Societies shun me still." The stains, from preservatives, suggested a red herring, his alibi solid, yet his bitter profile hinting at capacity for vengeance. Thorn hovered peripherally, his wiry frame serving refreshments, his servility fraying as his tremor became evident under Poirot's watchful eye. A psychological unraveling. In a secluded alcove, Poirot unearthed Lord Ashford's concealed diary, its pages unveiling affairs clandestine, thefts of intellectual property, disinheritances threatened, and secrets binding the suspects in a web of fractured alliances. The chapter drew to its zenith as Poirot, alone amid the whirring clocks, assembled the discordant fragments. The hours fracture like shattered glass, yet the grey cells, they shall coalesce the shards into truth's mosaic. Chapter 4. The striking midnight. As dusk descended upon Ashford Hall, the Yorkshire moors were cloaked in a mantle of shadow, the great clock tower standing sentinel against a sky bruised by roiling clouds. The gales howled with renewed ferocity, rattling the leaded panes and weaving an eerie symphony with the ceaseless ticking of the hall's myriad timepieces. as if time itself conspired to guard the secrets buried within these ancient walls. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall, his diminutive figure dwarfed by the towering grandfather clock, its carved mahogany face looming like a judge over the unfolding drama. His bespoke overcoat hung neatly upon a nearby rack, and his fedora rested with precision upon a marble console. Yet his verdant eyes gleamed with the intensity of a man on the cusp of revelation. The arsenic that had silenced Lord Timothy Ashford, administered with chilling precision at the midnight strike, was no mere poison, but a mechanism woven into the very heart of the clock, a masterpiece of murderous ingenuity. The Belgian detective's grey cells whirred like a finely tuned escapement, piecing together the mosaic of clues, alibis, and misdirections that danced like errant shadows in the candlelight. Poirot had summoned the household to the library once more, where the air was thick with suspicion, the solemn ticks of the colossal grandfather clock punctuating the silence like a heartbeat of doom. The suspects assembled, each a study in veiled disquiet. Lady Beatrice Ashford, her silver-streaked auburn tresses framed by the flicker of candelabra, her poise fraying like an overwound spring. Victor Langdon, his hawkish features taut, spectacles glinting with academic disdain. Edmund Ashford, his roguish charm curdled to defiance, chestnut locks dishevelled. Miss Lydia Harrow, prim yet trembling, her shrewd eyes darting behind spectacles. Silas Crowe, stooped and muttering, his gnarled hands clenched in shadow, and Elias Thorne, the valet, whose sallow face bore the strain of civility stretched to breaking. The room was a crucible of motives: jealousy, envy, desperation, vengeance and betrayal, each ticking in discord, awaiting Poirot's hand to realign the gears of truth. Monsieur et Mesdames, Poirot began, his voice a velvet scalpel, slicing through the tension. The hour approaches midnight, when the clock struck not merely time, but death. Lord Ashford fell, poisoned by arsenic released through a mechanism concealed within this very clock, a device requiring intimate knowledge of horology and a heart steeped in malice. Let us unravel this temporal treachery, for the truth, it hides not in shadows, but in the light of method. Lady Beatrice rose, her regal bearing faltering as her steely eyes flashed with accusation. "Victor, your envy drove you to this," she cried, her voice quivering with suppressed fury. "You despised Timothy's success. Your stolen designs festered in your soul." Victor's spectacles slipped as he sneered, his lean frame taut with indignation. "And you, madam, neglected by your husband for his clocks, did you not crave freedom and his fortune? I saw you lurking near the hall." Edmund's dark chuckle cut through the fray, his predatory gaze fixed on Lydia. "Or perhaps spurned love turned venomous, Miss Harrow. Your heart bled for uncle, and he scorned you. Poison suits a woman's wiles." Lydia clutched her shawl, her spectacles fogging with emotion. "How dare you, Edmund? Your debts would drive any man to murder. Inheritance was your only salvation." Crow's gravelly mutter rose from the shadows. "All of you, squabbling like thieves over a corpse. Ashford's lies ruined my name. Perhaps time exacted its own justice." Thorne, serving tea with mechanical precision, faltered, the silver tray clattering as a tremor seized his hand. A betrayal of nerves that Poirot's keen gaze did not miss. The valet's sallow face paled further, his tarnished brass eyes avoiding the detective's scrutiny. "Silence, s'il vous plaît." Poirot's command was a whip crack, stilling the room's cacophony. The clues, they proliferate like the ticks of a clock, yet they deceive. A glove, monogrammed with Monsieur Langdon's initial, found near the clock. Too conspicuous, non? Footprints, matching Mademoiselle Harrow's shoes, yet overlaid with another's tread. A forgery. A vial of arsenic, bearing Monsieur Crow's fingerprints, discarded in the hedgerows, hastily tossed to incriminate. These are red herrings, mes amis, sewn to obscure the true hand that turned time into a weapon. He paced, his polished brogues clicking against the parquet, each step a metronome of deduction. Consider the timeline. Lord Ashford fell at midnight, the clock's chime heralding his demise, yet alibis fracture. Madame Beatrice, your perfume lingered in the hall at 11:30, belying your claim of solitude. Monsieur Langdon, your archives were silent before 11, a gap in your vigil. Monsieur Edmund, a witness saw you slip a vial into your pocket. Debts make desperate men. Mademoiselle Harrow, your footprints suggest presence, yet another's tread obscures them. Monsieur Crow, your hands bear arsenic stain, yet your workshop alibi holds. And Monsieur Thorn. Poirot paused, his moustache twitching as he fixed the valet with a piercing stare. You claim to have heard the clock wound at 12:30, a lie, for its mechanism was stilled after the fatal strike. Accusations erupted like a sprung mainspring. Lady Beatrice pointed at Victor. Your pilfered patents. You tampered with his clock to reclaim your glory. Victor retorted venomously. And your threats of divorce, madam? That torn letter betrays your desperation. Edmund sneered at Lydia. Your scorned heart poisoned him. While Lydia snapped, your gambling debts poisoned your soul. Crow growled. Liars all. Ashford's hubris invited retribution. Thorn's tray crashed to the rug, tea staining the fibres as his tremor became blatant, his servility unraveling like a frayed cord. Poirot raised a hand, his presence a beacon of authority. The clock, it is the fulcrum of this crime. A new clue, mes amis. Within its casing, a hidden compartment, rigged with an arsenic dispenser triggered by the midnight strike. A brass key fragment, broken deliberately to conceal the tampering. Yet the true clue lies in behaviour. The tremor of a hand, the lie of a timeline, the fracture of loyalty. Poirot approached the grandfather clock, its face inscrutable, its pendulum swinging with relentless cadence. This mechanism required a horologist's precision and a traitor's heart. Madame Beatrice, your jealousy drove you to threaten divorce, but did it drive you further? Monsieur Langdon, your envy burned, but was the glove planted to ensnare you? Monsieur Edmund, your debts gnaw, but was the vial yours, or a trap? Mademoiselle Harrow, your footprints suggest guilt, but whose tread overlaid them? Monsieur Crow, your stained hands accuse, but your alibi deflects. And Monsieur Thorn, his gaze locked on the valet, whose sallow face now glistened with sweat. Your tremor, your lie about the winding, it betrays a deeper wound, a bequest promised, withheld, and perhaps a betrayal more intimate. Lady Beatrice gasped, her hand clutching her throat. What are you implying? Poirot's smile was serene yet lethal. The diary, madame, found in the study. It speaks of an affair, clandestine, passionate, between you and Thorn, a promise of escape from neglect. Yet you chose inheritance over elopement, wounding him doubly. His resentment, it festered, not only against Lord Ashford, but against you. Thorn's voice cracked, a strangled "no" escaping as he stumbled back, the tray abandoned. Oui, monsieur, Poirot pressed, relentless. You rigged the clock, your knowledge of its workings unmatched. The glove, the footprints, the vial, all misdirections to ensnare others. But your heart, it betrayed you first. The room froze, the suspect's eyes darting between Poirot and Thorn. Lady Beatrice's composure shattered, her voice a whisper. Elias, you couldn't. Victor sneered. A servant's plot. How banal. Edmund's grin was cold. Clever, yet undone. Lydia clutched her spectacles, silent, while Crow muttered, "Retribution, perhaps." Poirot raised a hand. "The truth ticks closer, mes amis. One final piece awaits. The confession that will set the clock aright." The chapter closed with Ashford Hall, cloaked in shadow. The great clock's face gleaming like a silent arbiter. Poirot stood resolute, his grey cells poised to unveil the final truth, as the storm's fury seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the striking midnight of revelation. Chapter 5. The Eternal Tick. As the stars pierced the veil of clouds above Ashford Hall, their cold gleam cast an ethereal glow through the library's leaded windows, transforming the room into a stage where truth would finally hold court. The tempest that had battered the Yorkshire moors had subsided to a mournful whisper, leaving only the relentless ticking of the great-grandfather clock to punctuate the silence. A solemn reminder of the temporal machinations that had orchestrated Lord Timothy Ashford's demise. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre of the gathered suspects, his diminutive figure radiating an authority that belied his stature. His bespoke overcoat draped neatly over a chair, and his verdant eyes gleaming like polished emeralds in the candlelight. His meticulously curled moustache quivered faintly, as if attuned to the rhythm of revelation, as he prepared to unveil the intricate mechanism of murder that had turned time itself into a weapon. The suspects encircled him, their faces a gallery of apprehension and defiance. Lady Beatrice Ashford, her regal poise crumbling. Victor Langdon, his hawkish features taut with suspicion. Edmund Ashford, his roguish charm extinguished. Miss Lydia Harrow, her prim facade trembling. Silas Crowe, his gnarled hands clenched. And Elias Thorne, the valet, whose sallow countenance now betrayed a man on the edge of collapse. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot began, his voice a silken thread weaving through the tension. "Attend, for the hour of truth has struck. The murder of Lord Timothy Ashford was no mere act of passion, but a symphony of precision, orchestrated through a mechanism concealed within this very clock. A hidden compartment, rigged to release arsenic at the midnight chime. The clues, they have ticked like the gears of a timepiece, each revealing a fragment of the puzzle. Now the grey cells of Hercule Poirot shall align them to unveil the murderer. Poirot paced slowly, his polished brogues clicking against the parquet with the cadence of a metronome, his gaze sweeping the assembly like the hands of a dial. Let us recapitulate. The glove, monogrammed with Monsieur Langdon's initial, found near the clock. A plant, too conspicuous to be genuine. The footprints, matching Mademoiselle Harrow's shoes, yet overlaid with another's tread. A forgery to mislead. The vial of arsenic, bearing Monsieur Crowe's fingerprints, discarded in haste within the hedgerows. A red herring to ensnare. These clues, they point to all, yet convict none. The true evidence lies in the timeline and the heart. He turned to the grandfather clock, its mahogany face inscrutable, its pendulum swinging with unyielding rhythm. The mechanism of death required a horologist's finesse and a traitor's motive. The timeline it fractures. Lord Ashford fell at midnight, the poison released by the clock's strike. Yet, Monsieur Thorne, you claim to have heard the clock wound at 12:30. A lie, for its mechanism was stilled post-mortem, as confirmed by the horological expert summoned this morn. Thorne's sallow face blanched, his tarnished brass eyes darting like a trapped animal's. I misspoke, monsieur," he stammered, his tremor now unmistakable, the silver tray abandoned on a sideboard. Poirot's smile was serene, yet lethal as a stiletto. Non, monsieur, you did not misspeak. You betrayed yourself. But let us examine the others, lest justice be hasty. Madame Beatrice, your perfume lingered in the hall at 11:30, contradicting your claim of solitude. Your jealousy, it burned. Lord Ashford's clocks were his true love, non? Yet the diary reveals more. A clandestine affair with Monsieur Thorn, a promise of escape from neglect, broken when you chose inheritance over elopement. Lady Beatrice's hand flew to her throat, her silver-streaked tresses trembling as she whispered, "How could you know?" "The diary, madame, hidden in the study," Poirot continued, relentless. "It speaks of your liaison, of Thorn's devotion turned to despair when you betrayed him. But you did not rig the clock. Your heart sought freedom, not murder." He pivoted to Victor Langdon, whose spectacles glinted with defiance. "Monsieur, your envy of Ashford's stolen patents drove you to bitter schemes. The glove, it bears your mark, yet its placement reeks of artifice. You were framed, non? Your narcissism would not permit such clumsy evidence." Victor's sneer faltered, his voice sharp. "I despised him, yes, but I am no poisoner." Poirot nodded, then turned to Edmund. "Monsieur Ashford, your debts are a noose, your disinheritance a wound. A witness saw you with a vial, yet it matches those in the workshop, accessible to all. Your charm, it conceals desperation, but not the cunning to craft this mechanism." Edmund's roguish grin vanished, his eyes wet with artful tears. "I'm no killer, Poirot." "Mademoiselle Harrow," Poirot continued, his gaze softening as it met Lydia's trembling spectacles. "Your spurned love festered. Your footprints marked the hall, yet overlaid, suggesting another's hand. Vengeance drove you to dream of retribution, but the clock's complexity eludes your skill." Lydia's voice was a whisper. "He humiliated me, but I could not." Finally, Poirot addressed Crowe. "Monsieur, your stained hands and bitter grudge accuse you, yet your alibi in the workshop holds firm. The vial, it bears your prints, but was discarded by another. Retribution was your motive, yet not your act." Crowe muttered, his gnarled hands unclenching. "His lies ruined me, but I'm no murderer." Poirot returned to Thorn, whose tremor had become a convulsion, his servile mask shattered. "Monsieur Thorn, you alone possess the knowledge to rig the clock. For 20 years you served Lord Ashford, polishing his timepieces, winding his clocks, yet he denied you the promised bequest, the stewardship you craved. Worse, your affair with Madame Beatrice, it promised liberation, until she chose wealth over you. Your resentment, it turned to vengeance, not only against your master, but against her betrayal." Thorn staggered, his voice a broken whisper. "No, it cannot be." "Oui, monsieur," Poirot pressed, his tone unyielding as the pendulum's arc. "The glove, you planted to implicate Langdon. The footprints, you forged to ensnare Harrow. The vial, you discarded with Crowe's prints, taken from his workshop. Your lie about the winding betrays you, for the clock was silent after midnight. You rigged the arsenic dispenser, your horological skill unmatched, your motive a wound of heart and pride." Lady Beatrice collapsed onto the chaise, her composure shattered. "Elias, you swore loyalty." Victor's sneer was cold. "A servant's revenge. How pedestrian." Edmund's voice was bitter, clever, yet undone by a detective's eye. Lydia clutched her shawl, silent, while Crowe muttered, "Justice, perhaps, misaimed." Thorn crumpled, his sallow face a mask of anguish. "She promised we'd flee together," he choked, tears streaming. "But she chose his fortune, left me nothing but scorn. I rigged the clock, for him, for her. I wanted them both to suffer." Poirot bowed his head, his voice softening. The grey cells, they are infallible. Time it heals not, but reveals. You, Monsieur Thorne, turned its march into murder, but truth has set the pendulum aright. Chief Inspector Japp, who had entered silently, stepped forward, his bowler hat tilted with grim satisfaction. Well done, Poirot. Handcuffs for this one, lads. As Thorne was led away, his sobs echoed like the fading ticks of a broken clock. The suspects dispersed in stunned silence, their secrets laid bare. Poirot lingered by the grandfather clock, its face now a symbol of justice restored. Time, he murmured. It is the silent witness, the arbiter of truth. Dear listener, thus concludes Murder Beneath the Clock, Poirot's timeless secret. The enigma is unravelled, the guilty unmasked, and the ticking of justice resumes its steady rhythm. Until we meet again in the labyrinth of mystery, let the shadows of Ashford Hall linger in your thoughts, and may your own grey cells ponder the secrets time conceals. Good night, sweet dreams.